Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at onpurposely.com.
If you define yourself by all of these other things, I don't know any of those things that can't be shaken or changed. If I don't have some kind of foundation of who I am inside, apart from these things, then for me personally, then I'm teetering on disaster.
Her name is Sherri, and you might know her best as producer Sherri from the Brant Hansen Show. So thankful that she took some time to sit down and discuss all things passion and purpose. And I like to start in childhood, Sherri, you know this, because I feel like there's often something that shows up when you're like a toddler that is just ingrained in your personality. Do you have a story like that?
I have a story that my mom tells that she was just always very, very afraid of me wandering because I talked to everybody. And I'm sure people have kids like that are just so outgoing. She didn't know what to do with that. Like, she's a first-time mom. She was a single mom. She was not with her family at the time because she was kind of ostracized because she was a single mom. And so it's just me and her. And she's looking at this little person with this giant head that won't shut up. And so she said, I talked all the time, even when I didn't have words. And sometimes she said, she just looked at me like, I wonder what she's saying. She said, because it felt like sentences. It felt like there was a comprehension on my part. So it wasn't even gibberish, she said. It was just sounded like she actually knows what she's talking about. And she would, if she had to hold my hand very tightly in stores and things like that, because I would wander off and say hi and talk with people. And so I think from that point, I think she's still holding my hand tightly. She's still on edge. Still not sure how it's all going to work out.
We're going to come back to that. But first, I want to ask you, so there it is, that big personality pretty much straight out of the gate. And then was there ever a time where you tried to dim your light because you felt like that big personality was too much for others?
Yeah, I did. It's been a learning and growing process because I am the loudest one in the room, even when I'm not attempting to be. And then people will assume that I'm doing that for attention, and I'm not. I don't know. I always say I have 2 volumes, 0 or 10. And so I don't have really gray areas. I'm either black or white. I'm either all the way on or I'm somewhere asleep for, 2 days. I'm just big. And when you're growing up, it's hard, especially as a woman, if I can say that. As a woman, it's difficult because people view it a certain way, and that's just not who I am. I don't seek out attention. People think that I do, but I don't. I'm just loud. I have a big personality, and and God is still working on me with that, of this is who you are. I think when I'm single, when I, entered dating age and started in radio and, thought I was all hot to trot in Pittsburgh because I had a little radio show and everything. And so everybody knew me, whatever. Sherri Lynn in Your Weekend is how I started.
Oh, I like it.
So I started with that. And then I just had a morning show and all that. And dating was difficult because I'm just big and it's hard to dial that back. And there weren't a lot of guys who could handle that. Mm. And I'm just being honest in my life. I'm not making a sweeping judgment of people. I'm saying for me. And then it was like, well, can I change myself, And in junior high and high school, my mom left the projects where we were to take us to a high school or junior high and high school where we would get a better education. But I was the only Black girl there. I was the only Black person at the junior high. And then there were like maybe 5 or 6 others when we got to the high school. And, culturally, there are cultural differences. There just are, right? And so that was difficult for me at an age where you're already questioning yourself and who you are and what you are. But you're just the big, literally big. I was a portly child as well. So you're just a big one. And it was so hard. That was a hard time for me. Oh my gosh. And so I had to battle those things as I got older of just accepting who I am and accepting that God uses it. And he uses it to, to make people feel not alone. That a person who feels like they're alone in the corner, I have enough bigness for both of us. Come out of the corner. Let's hang out. I remember a guy named Danny Klingensmith. This is my high school story of how my bigness helped others. I think I helped him. Who knows? Danny Klingensmith was an introvert. He sat by himself at lunch all the time. And there was a table of Black girls. There was like 4 or 5 of us, and we used to sit together. And one day, after seeing him for months sitting by himself, I go over and I say, Danny, why don't you come sit with us? And he's like, no, that's okay. And I was like, no, come, you're sitting by yourself. Just come sit with us, right? And so I start picking up his tray.
Wow.
This is me. So I start picking up his tray and stuff. Like, come on, you don't want to be by yourself. You can't want to be by yourself.
Wow.
So he comes over and sits with the Black girls and sat with us for the rest of the year and never said a word. He just sat. So Danny Klingensmith would go get his tray and his little milk and his little pizza square and walk over to where the Black girls are and sit down at the table and hang out with us. Fast forward, I don't know how many years. I may have been 23 or 24. I had gotten a speeding ticket. I was fighting it, even though I was in fact speeding. And I go to the magistrate, and there's this guy sitting across from me. This way, don't make snap judgments. His head is shaved. He has just piercing blue eyes, but his features are dark. And I was a little nervous, right? And he just keeps staring at me. And I'm sitting there, and it gets awkward when someone's just staring at you, and you don't know whether to look away or not. And he said, Sherri? And I said, Danny? Was Danny Klingensmith's in the magistrate office. And he comes over and gives me this huge bear hug. And that's just like one of the stories where it's like, yeah, this is how God made you. And sometimes it feels a little uncomfortable in society, but use it to help people. And that's what I think.
Let's talk a little more about identity. I am surprised that if you ask someone, and I've even done this with myself, who are you? Mm-hmm. You might get what I do. You might get certain roles in the family structure. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to like, who am I apart from all those things? Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's so important to know the answer to that?
Because if you define yourself by all of these other things, I don't know any of those things that can't be shaken or changed. So you can be somebody's wife, and maybe you cannot be. You could be somebody's mother, but then the relationship is fractured. You can be all of these things that can be taken away. If I don't have some kind of foundation of who I am inside, apart from these things, then for me personally, then I'm teetering on disaster because I've given parts of myself that people can take, abuse, whatever. I have to have a sense of my own self, of who I am, how I operate in the world. That's what my grandfather used to say. So I never knew that people didn't operate the way we did as a family until I got to college. And I was like, oh, people don't get together every Sunday. People aren't loud like us. People aren't like, I just didn't know. Everybody's cousins aren't like best friends. I didn't know any of that. I thought that
you guys had to have your own separate table at every restaurant.
That is exactly right. And if they had a separate room, they would put us over there because it was like, it's too much. That's how we were and are. So I didn't understand. I thought everybody was. So I came back from college and I said to my grandpa, there's people who don't know their cousins. There's people who don't really see their grandparents. There's people who don't get together with their family. There's people who don't go to church on Sunday and Bible study on Wednesday and revival on Thursday and all the other services. I said, why are we like this? And he said, I can't help my grandfather, pastor, 54 something plus years in Baptist church. He said, I can't help how those people do. This is how we operate in the world. And I thought, that was so good. This is how I operate in the world. This is who I am. And he had such a strong sense of self that he really, I remember telling him that one of our cousins had low self-esteem. I told someone this story the other day. He has low self-esteem. And I was like, Grandpa, do you understand what I'm saying? 'Cause he's looking at me, blink, 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 blink. Grandpa, do you understand what I'm saying? He has low self-esteem. Because he had asked me, what's wrong with that boy? And I said, he has low self-esteem, Grandpa. He said, what did that mean? And so now I'm trying to explain to like an 82-year-old man what low self-esteem is. So I'm trying to unpack it. And he said, what will you have that for? You come from me.
Wow.
And I was like, well, yeah, he just had a very strong sense of self. And I think he gave that to us to just hold your own in the world. Hold both feet on the ground, hold your own. And I don't need your space. That keeps me from coveting. That keeps me from, when you know who you are, I don't have to covet. I don't have to be jealous. I don't have to be envious because that's your space in the world. That's not my space in the world. This is my space in the world. And I can hold this space.
There was someone that knew part of your space in the world before you knew it.
Uh-huh.
And you were actually living sort of the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you go ahead and talk about a letter that I'm assuming you still have to this day?
Mm-hmm. My mom, she believed God for me when I didn't know what that meant, right? And I don't know what it is. People ask me, oh, you're so wonderful taking care of your mother, because I do. But she literally stood between me and hell and was like, no. She told Satan, no. Not until, like, she's a Bible believing woman, and in her faith, she believed that I had a purpose. And so I was a very wild child, very wild, very obsessive, very excessive, all of those things. And one day at church, a lady prophesies, and she says to my mom, all these things that she felt like God said for my life, who I would be, what my purpose was going to be, how I was going to walk in the world. And my mom got the cassette tape. I told you how old I am. Got the cassette tape and had it transcribed into a letter on a piece of paper, all the things. And she would read that, and then she'd fold it up and put it in her dresser drawer because she believed it so much. And what she didn't know is that when I would come stumbling in the house from God knows where, with God knows who, whatever, I would go and read it. And it just seemed so far away. It seemed like the word seemed so foreign. Like there's no way I could get there. But I did. And I'm grateful. And yes, I still have that letter. And my mom still holds on to those things now for her grandchildren, which is amazing.
What are some of the lines that you remember when you would read?
I remember that I was going to speak, and that she should teach me, and that she should, there was what, I can't remember the word. She said, but hear her, because those are God's words that she's speaking. And I was a kid, right? But my mom took that, man. She took that and ran with it. And there was just a lot of the stuff that I do today about speaking, about just kind of being there for people in a way that is real and authentic. And yeah, I just remember that hear her. You can correct her, but hear her. And I think my mom does that to this day. One of my favorite things about her is that she's really sweet, and she does listen to me sometimes. Except for the fact when I told her to eat chicken and rice soup, because she's been diagnosed with breast cancer. And so she has, I know it's a rabbit trail, but she has chemo. And so I have to say to her, we can't eat what we're used to eating anymore, right? Like we're just a big black soul food biscuit eating family. We can't do that now, right? So we have to eat better. And so she has this chicken rice soup that she loves that she can eat. You eat that before your treatment, right? Before the treatment. And then after, have a little bit of that after the treatment, just so you have to have a little something on your stomach. You can't go to Cracker Barrel and have the ham and meatloaf dinner after treatment. That's not going to work. Okay. So I fly away for business. I send my cousin down there to be with her. And I call my mom. I said, how was treatment? Oh, girl, was good. I'm doing great. I said, and your food? Listen, I just decided. I decided to go ahead and have me 2 hot dogs. And so it's just silent. And I'm like, so you decided that. You decided to have some big, fat, processed meat right after your, I know, but I thought, why not go ahead and have me a couple hot dogs? And I was like, Mom, I have many answers to that question of why not. So, but she typically listens to me. Mm-hmm. And I really think it stems back to that of here's a person who she believes God has given some wisdom to, and I'm grateful for that.
Another thing she did, and I think this was before cell phones, she wanted to know where you were.
Yeah.
And she prayed, God, where's my baby?
Yeah.
How old were you and where were you? And tell the story.
I can't remember how old I was, but I do remember being at a party. And she's done this a couple times, more than a couple, where she would ask God, where is she? Because I was always somewhere doing something I shouldn't be doing. So this particular time that I remember is I was at the party and my mom knocked on the door and I was passed out on the couch and knocked on the door and said, hey, is Sherri here? Because she had asked God where I was. And I was there. And I remember, that was an awful day of seeing her face, the fear of a mother, because she doesn't know where I'm at. And I just wasn't in a place yet. And those of you who have been caught in things, you know what I'm saying. I wasn't in a place yet to really let that resonate in me on how much I was hurting her, every decision I was making. But I do remember the look on her face when I got up and went to the door and saw her. Man, she went through a lot with me. She really did. She went through a lot with me.
It just makes me think about how God is so tenderhearted when a mother is going to him on behalf of one of her children, whatever the circumstances are.
Yeah.
I feel like there's just a lot of examples of how the prayers of a mother or a father
move
over their
God
children
more than it seems like anything. When a mother is like, come help me, it just feels like God is like, I got it. Like there's something, it seems in scripture, there's something about the prayer and the cry of a mother that really moves him. And she cried for me a lot, man. She really did. And I'm just eternally grateful for that.
And she's also gotten to see the words on that letter come to fruition. So she has this joy of being able to see prayers answered and what you do now.
Yeah, she does. So she'll get in the car and she wants to listen to the radio. And I'm sure you understand how you hate the sound of your own voice sometimes and you don't want to hear yourself. And she is always, and she's like, I'm like, Mom, can we turn that off? I just want to hear one more thing. And I'm like, I'm actually here. So if you want to turn that off, I can say some things to you. It's the same. It's actually the same person, Mom. I'm there and I'm here in person in the car, and I can talk to you if you'd like me to.
But what that signifies is just, she likes to hear what you're doing.
Oh, she loves it.
With the platform of ministry that the Lord has given you.
She listens to the podcast. I know it's a little silly for her, but she listens every day. When I go to events, she comes with me. She gets to enjoy that. You know what I mean? I'm serious about that. She gets to enjoy, the fruit of your labor. You labored. So you get to enjoy that. And I make sure whenever I can that she's included because she worked hard for it. She prayed hard for it.
The Passion Meets Purpose podcast is made possible thanks to our friends at Northwest University. Ensuring a welcoming spirit for you at Northwest University, your tuition remains lower than all other Christian schools in Washington. And NU is all in on tech. They've got a brand new state-of-the-art technology studio, and majors include UX design, data science, video production, audio production, and computer science. This is in addition to an already diverse offering of business, nursing, education, sciences, communication, psychology, music, and humanities. Northwest University is a faith-based community, Christ-centered in all they do. At Northwest University, your future isn't canceled. It's just beginning. And so now that you're in the space of operating in all those giftings, just the space that the Lord has given you in the world, do you find that as you become more and more fully yourself, embracing all of it, you feel like you're in that sweet spot?
Gosh, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't know what the sweet spot or sour spot or any spot. I don't know. I think that I know I grow every year, I feel like. When more comfortable with who God made me. I know getting older is really sweet to me. I know we're not supposed to say that, and that's supposed to be horrible. And no. It's really sweet to me because the things I've accrued this history, you know what I mean, with God in my mind. This history where I feel like things don't rattle me as much, and I feel more comfortable in creating. And not creating for the masses, creating because I have something to say. And I feel like it's something important to say. I think it'll be a blessing to people. Put it out there. Whereas when you're younger, it's a lot of scurrying, hoping people like it. Did they like me? Oh my goodness, 10 likes on this one, 15 likes on that one. You know what I mean? All of that. That is starting to fall away. And that's a sweet spot where you just create it, you just make it, you feel good about it, you go on about your business until the next thing you want to make. That is a sweet spot that I'm getting into that I really, really love.
Let's talk about how, this is called Passion Meets Purpose. So it's not just knowing who you are and doing what you want to do or like. Mm-hmm. It's really how you give back to the world.
Yeah.
Why does it matter to find that aspect of who we are?
You know, that's the other thing of getting older is learning, hopefully, I had a really good example. I have a really good example in my mother that life isn't all about you. You know what I mean? Like what your bucket list, what you're trying to achieve, what your even resolutions and all that, that's all very us focused. As I get older, I realize I'm going to be okay. You know, God forbid if I drop dead tomorrow, I'm going to be all right. But I have things that I have experienced that are helpful for people. And I've one of my kids from my youth group called me and she's like, "Hey, Miss Sherri," and she's an adult now, owns her own marketing company, very successful. And a lot of my kids from my old youth group were very successful. So she calls me and she says, "I just wanted to tell you, you should be really proud." And I was like, "Why?" And she's like, "Well, she had contacted another girl from the youth group who's now an adult and owns her own stuff. And we're going to collaborate on some stuff." And then I was like, "Look at us, man. Miss Sherri raised some great kids." And so the funny thing about that is that's really like a backhand humble brag for herself. Look how awesome I am. And yeah, you had a part in that. So I look at that. You just can't beat pouring your life out in the service of others. I know that is so cliche, but the other part or the other side of it is just you living for you. And man, that is so boring. I don't know anyone who has great stories for just doing things for themselves. Great stories come from doing things for others, even if those other people get on your nerves, even if those other people are like, "Why am I doing this?" The story that comes from it is so much richer than you just in the pursuit of your own happiness. And so I think pouring your life out for others ends up in real great stories and you end up with a life well lived, which I feel like I have already.
It makes me think of how Brant talks about being content.
Yeah.
And usually the most content people I know in my life are the ones that are very generous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Live below their means.
Yeah.
And
super grateful.
Yeah.
I think gratefulness is one of the biggest answers for contentment. How do you get contentment? Is gratefulness for where you are and what you have, right? Because my uncle used to do this thing where we'd be in Bible study. "Anybody have any prayer requests?" You raise your hand. "I need a new job. I can't stand my boss." Okay, we pray. All right, now you have a new opportunity, right? And then it's like, "Anyone have a prayer request?" I have an interview at such and such a place. Please pray. Okay, we pray. Great. You get the job. Yay. Everyone in Bible study, yay. 4 months later, "I can't stand my boss. I need a new job." And my uncle would always say, "Okay, so what is the prayer now? Because you asked us to pray for this and you got it. So now what are we going to be praying? Because we prayed for this job. This job is an answer to prayer." And if you can think of, and wherever you are, there is so much to be grateful for. And the more you let yourself bathe in that, I really think the more content you become and the more purpose starts to show itself. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like purpose shows up. Like things just, I don't have to write on a list, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that. When I live in the service of others and I'm grateful, things just start showing up and I'm like, hey, I could do, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm able to do that. That has been my life. There is not a lot that I have sought after. And that is the honest to goodness truth. I know a lot of people think that I'm not a hustler like that per se. I'm not a networker. So I'm not out there to talk to this one, go over here, go, oh, okay, yeah, I'll get his number. And I'm just a person who really, really wants to be grateful and content. And that somehow things just are kind of drawn to you.
How have you seen God be that networker for you, bringing something into your life that you deeply loved or found meaning in, and you thought, wow, didn't even know I needed this, but you brought it my way and found yourself just in he did it. He made it happen.
Gosh, that's the Brant Hansen Show. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know anything really about contemporary Christian music. I think I knew Sandy Patty and Lauren L. They sang a song, I've just seen Jesus or something like that. We used to play it at Easter. I don't know why, but anyway, that was the extent of what I knew about contemporary Christian music. I knew nothing. I did not know the network that he was on. I didn't know who he was. And he was pretty well known in Christian radio, but I didn't know Christian radio. So the position that was available was a content coordinator, which was not an on-air position. It was, helping with social media, answering phones, and in essence, a step up from a producer, which is, what they call me, but I do more. But I applied for that job because I hated where I was and I couldn't take it anymore. And they kept calling me and, interviewed and all of that, but I couldn't have put that together. I think when people see us now in a show, we've been doing it for 10 years, people are like, oh, of course, Brant and Sherri. Now think about that. Who? That can only be God. Who takes some guy from Assumption, Illinois, who is on, the autism spectrum, and some, loud Black girl from Pittsburgh who has never left Pittsburgh and has no idea what Christian radio is, in a booth together and think that that's going to work? That doesn't work on paper. No paper that you write on. You can write on parchment. It doesn't work on paper. But somehow God did that. Neither of us can take credit for that. That showed up in my life and God did it.
I think it's such a great example of everything we've talked about, because in order for that show to work, Brant has to be fully him.
Yeah.
And you have to be fully you.
Yeah.
And I don't know all the ins and outs. I kind of had a picture me in the nosebleeds of a stadium and pretend you guys are on the field. And that's how foggy my view is. But correct me if I'm wrong. My thought is you guys started out you were on a couple networks.
Yes, that's right.
And I feel like I've picked up the pieces that maybe they were trying to make you guys into something that didn't quite fit, or have some parameters around you that doesn't give you both the freedom that you have now to be fully yourself.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good way to put it. That there were parameters, or just, and I don't begrudge them for it. You have your standards or whatever you feel like you have for your network, and that's great. But we weren't gonna fit in it, and we just weren't going to fit in it. And there were just particular ways that we are that just wasn't going to work. And yeah, that's it.
And so once you guys were on your own, and it has grown and grown and grown from an identity perspective, I feel like that's an example of, okay, what if we didn't have those parameters?
Yeah.
What if some of the regular rules of radio, simple things like, I don't know, when I first got into this, I was taught sarcasm doesn't work.
Right.
Don't be too silly. Don't be too spiritual. Yeah. You guys are very silly and very spiritual.
The whole thing. Every little thing that they wrote on the paper and told you not to do.
You guys do it now, and you do it very well.
Thank you.
And it works.
Thank you.
And I think it's just that example of, don't let someone tell you that part of your personality needs to be homogenized.
Yeah.
But why don't you lean even deeper into it?
Yeah.
And then see what might happen.
I think so. And I think if you can take it with humility, I think that's important. I think both of us bring that to the table as much as we can. is in honoring each other, so that in honoring each other's differences and being honest about that, so that the relationship of brother and sister works. And then that's what you hear on the air, right? So we work that, and then that shows up on the air. So I think how you are, who you are. Brant always says that everyone loves a wild horse. Like, oh my goodness, look at that horse running wild; it's gorgeous. And then we quickly try to hurry up and wrangle it up and get it back into the barn, because no, you can't just be out there running, right? So. Yeah, I think that our show was a wild horse. And, people may not have known what to do with it when, I don't know if I may have told this story, is when I was let go from the network, I called Brant and I said, I knew I was going to be let go. So I called him. He had already left. And I said, yep, probably going to get let go today. I'm going to a meeting with them. And then he said, well, will you please come here when you're done? And I said, sure. So I have the meeting. And that meeting was it was a long meeting. So it was probably an hour, 15 minutes or something. Just to give you an idea. So it's an hour, 15, hour, 20 minutes after I've called him that I come around the corner to his house. And he's standing on the corner and he's just looking straight forward, because Brant has a ability just to focus on something and so I don't know what but he's looking just straight forward and just standing on the corner with his hands in his pocket. And so I pull up and I get out the car. I said, what are you doing? And he was like, I was waiting for you. And so I said, did you come out here after I called you? And he was like, yeah, I was just going to wait for you to come. So he'd been standing out there waiting for me to show for an hour and 20 minutes. And I went in, and I remember specifically, I remember going in and sitting with him and his wife, and we ate watermelon and something else she had. And we had no idea where we were going to go. We had no idea what was going to happen. And we started just to give you something, we started like a little porch podcast, because we didn't know if we were going to still be able to have a show together. We didn't know who was going to pick that show up. So I would just come to his house. I'd talk and laugh with his wife, play with his dogs. We'd go out on the back porch and we'd record a podcast. And people, because they were looking for us, started subscribing to it. So then when we actually became the show, had the show, was on the air, that podcast blew up, but it only blew up because we already had established that, right? That's a God thing. You don't know. We didn't know any of that stuff. We had no idea where we were going. We had no idea it was going to work. But it's just being faithful, daily faithfulness. He talks about all the time, being faithful to what you have and then trusting God. And he does work it out. He did.
Thanks so much for being here today on the Passion Meets Purpose podcast. We're going to talk again in 2 weeks, but in the meantime, if you want to do us a huge favor, obviously you know this by now, if you leave a review, it really helps others to find this podcast. It also helps us to make it better. And then you can contact us anytime at Purposely Podcasts. Until next time, thank you.